When you get into a hot car, you just twist a dial and get a blast of cold air. But keeping an entire commercial flight cool is a lot harder, especially because the system doing the cooling actually starts with scorchingly hot air tapped straight from the jet engines. If you're curious about how these incredible flying machines actually work, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's start with smaller, propeller-driven planes. They use something called a vapor cycle system. It's a closed loop that pushes a chemical liquid through tubes to absorb heat, working much like the air conditioner sitting in your window at home. But large commercial jets, like this Boeing 737 flying miles above the Earth, do things differently. They rely on an air cycle system. They take superheated, high-pressure air pulled directly from the spinning engines, known as bleed air, and use it to cool the cabin. Using engine heat to create freezing air sounds backward. But at 30,000 feet, where the outside air is too thin to breathe, this high-pressure air does two crucial jobs at once. It cools the cabin, and it provides the heavy air pressure passengers need to survive. So how does fire become ice? The journey starts at the pack valve. Think of this as the main floodgate. When it opens, it lets that boiling hot engine air rush into the conditioning system. First, this hot air flows through a primary heat exchanger. It's essentially a radiator. Freezing outside air, called ram air, blasts over the outside of the tubes. This drops the internal air temperature down significantly, though it's still quite hot. Next, the air enters the air cycle machine, or ACM. Here, a compressor squeezes the air tight, which actually heats it back up. But immediately after, it passes through a second heat exchanger, getting hit by another blast of freezing outside air to cool it down a second time. Now comes the vital step. The tightly squeezed air is pushed through an expansion turbine. When it rushes out the other side, it expands incredibly fast. Because expanding air naturally loses its heat, the temperature plummets to near freezing. This sudden freeze turns any natural humidity into a thick fog. Before it reaches you in the cabin, the air spins through a water separator. The swirling motion flings the heavy water droplets to the sides, leaving only dry, cold air to pass through to the vents. If that freezing air blew directly onto passengers, the cabin would feel like a freezer. It has to be warmed up before it reaches the overhead vents. To get it exactly right, little temperature sensors called thermistors act like the thermostat in your hallway. They measure the cabin heat and tell a mixing valve to open. This valve perfectly blends the freezing air with a small amount of hot engine air that skipped the cooling process, creating whatever comfortable temperature the pilots dialed in. Because this entire process relies on the immense pressure of jet engines, smaller planes without jet engines have to use a different method. They use the vapor cycle system. In this closed loop, a liquid chemical flows through an evaporator coil. A fan blows cabin air over the coil, and the chemical absorbs the heat from the room. A compressor then pumps that heated chemical to a condenser on the outside of the plane, dumping the heat into the sky. While the closed chemical loop of the vapor cycle strictly keeps a small cabin cool, the air cycle system tackles a much bigger job, using raw engine output to keep hundreds of people comfortable and breathing easy at high altitudes. Regardless of the cooling method, these complex networks of high-pressure tubes and valves require rigorous specialized maintenance to keep every flight running safely. The vapor cycle systems in smaller planes carry their own unique risks. The chemical refrigerants sealed inside them, liquids like R134A or the older R12, come with a heavy responsibility for the environment. If these liquids leak, they can eat away at the Earth's ozone layer. Because of this, strict environmental laws ensure these chemicals are never simply released into the atmosphere. That's why aviation mechanics must hold specific environmental certifications to work on these units. They operate like specialized recovery teams, using sealed equipment to capture every drop of refrigerant before a system is even opened for repair. Maintaining a comfortable cabin at 30,000 feet relies on exact environmentally safe work on the ground before the plane leaves the hangar. Thanks for joining us today. Keep looking up and keep exploring the amazing machinery that makes modern flight possible. See you in the next one.